Hi, welcome back to Waiting in Laodicea. This is Prophecy Episode 1. And the general Episode 1, where I welcomed you to Waiting in Laodicea, I pointed out that Matthew tells us we need to be waiting and to be ready. What are we going to be ready for? Well, we need to be ready for the fact the end of times is coming. It's almost here. Now, the end of times generally refers to the time of the tribulation, which is followed by the second coming of Christ. Now, a lot of people say, but AT, isn't the rapture supposed to happen before the tribulation? Well, that's a possibility, but it's not a promise. Nowhere in the New Testament are we given an exact time of the rapture. The rapture, for those of you that don't know, is where Christ calls the believers up to him, and then they wait out until the time for the second coming. Some people, most notably Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, put the rapture right before the tribulation. I can't guarantee this. Using a little common sense, though, I know that we're supposed to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So there is a possibility that the church will still be here on earth during the tribulation. Now, for those of you that have got your mindset that this is not how it's going to be, there's still other things you need to be ready for. First off, nowhere in the New Testament does it mention the United States either in symbolism or by name. There are a lot of countries listed in and being part of the tribulation and the end times. There's there's references that more or less point to the Great Bear of the North, meaning Russia. We have possibilities of Egypt, Syria, other countries in the Middle East, and even China itself will make a possible cameo in the end of times. Now, there is still this one big group of countries that is not listed, and that is the group that is headed by the Antichrist, a 10-nation confederation that he assumes power of and eventually uses that to rule the world. Well, the United States isn't in that list. Now, if we're not part of the Antichrist little confederation, then we're not listed anywhere, and we're not involved. There's basically three ways the U.S. isn't going to be involved. Either natural disaster, man-made disaster, or what I'd like to call a political failure. Natural disasters. How many of y'all watched 2012? Fantastic movie, in my opinion. I love a good disaster movie, and 2012 seemed to just have about every major disaster there was. If you remember the part where Woody Harrelson's character is sitting up there in the national park broadcasting about a super volcano. Yellowstone National Park does sit on top of what is considered a super volcano. And that volcano has steadily, very slowly, been growing. The last time that volcano went off, ash from that volcano reached almost to the Mississippi River. This would be a major natural disaster, and it would majorly impact life of the United States, to the point where there probably wouldn't be a United States after this. You would have small groups of survivors, but most people that live in this area will either be dead or will have ran away. Other possibilities, tidal waves from both in the Atlantic and the Pacific. There's possible major tidal waves that could hit the coast. Solar flare. The list of possible natural disasters is not a very short list. second way to see the United States get taken out, what I call man-made disasters. The biggest and most prominent, and sadly, most people are seeing as a possibility, is a civil war. The division in the United States right now between the Republicans and the Democrats is so sharp that neither side can negotiate. Neither side is willing to compromise. And frankly, in the actions that we've seen since the beginning of this year, the Democrat Party seems to be hell-bent on going out for blood. This type of situation, if somebody doesn't step back from the edge, will eventually lead to a civil war in the United States. The problem with the Civil War, unlike the last one where you had the North versus the South, here you're going to have cities versus country. By country, I mean the rural areas. You're going to have neighborhood versus neighborhood, small town versus small town, and even, sadly, neighbor versus neighbor. This is going to be a very bloody war. Other man-made disasters that could happen, an EMP. We've been pushing and trying to get China to play by the same rules as the rest of the world, and they seem to be very determined to do things their own way. Setting off an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse over the United States could very well cripple the U.S. economy. And yes, the U.S. would probably try to respond, depending on who the president was. President Biden, who gets sworn in on the 20th, supposedly has a lot of ties to the Chinese government. So maybe he wouldn't be so quick to respond, especially if the Chinese government had some way to deny responsibility. For example, having Kim Jong-un, or is it Il, whichever one of the Kim Jongs in North Korea, launch the EMP for him. All it would take would be for them to give him a rocket that would actually fly. EMP goes off, the U.S. is crippled. The final area of possibilities is what I call political mess-ups. The United States presently is sitting at $27 trillion in debt. For this $27 trillion, we get just about nothing. We're the only country in the world without socialized medicine. We also have the largest military in the world, which isn't really doing the U.S. people much good. Our soldiers are out dying in other countries and not dying for us. It would not take much for the U.S. to finally reach that limit where we can no longer spend our way out of it. When I get to the subject of money in one of the later episodes, I'll be talking about how your dollar isn't really money. It's a promise. It's a dream. And that dream is only effective as long as people trust the government to pay it. Now, history has shown us what happens to governments that lose the faith. When people don't trust the government to keep their money to pay the value of their money, the money gets devalued. The U.S. dollar could easily become devalued, especially with China continuing to grow. It won't take much for the U.S. to just start slipping down. A little here, a little there, spending more than we're bringing in consistently, and eventually we stop being a superpower. So what's going to happen if we stop being a superpower? Well, the key thing here is, how did it happen? By natural disaster? Then the minute it happens, you need to get out of town. You need to run to the hills. Man-made disaster? Your dollar might be worth something, but generally in emergencies and in disasters, The dollar is paper. It's worth nothing. If you don't prepare your dollar, you have nothing. So what are you going to do? Well, let me back up a second and ask you a couple questions. When you want to make dinner for tomorrow night, what do? Well, most of you are sitting back going, well, I go to the cupboard. If you haven't gone to the cupboard and don't have any food in the house yet, then what do? Well, that answer is even easier. Go to the grocery store. I go to the Walmart Supercenter. I buy the stuff I want for dinner, I come home and I make it. Yeah, you're kind of hoping the Supercenter's open. Yeah, Walmarts are always open. Not always. With the disaster hits and the U.S. gets plunged into basically a state of anarchy, then there is no more grocery store. Do you know where food comes from? Do you know how to raise food? Do you know how to grow your own food? These are the things that you need to start looking at and preparing for. One of the first things I tell people to do is look around you right now and where are your necessities? There are certain necessities of life, the first and foremost of which is water. You cannot survive without water. Now, some people say, well, no, we got to have air first. Yes, we have to have air first. But air, you either have it or you have to use a gas mask or something to filter for it. But water, can't put on a mask and have water. If you're living in the middle of a desert, there's no water. You get your water where? You get your water from the water company. They pipe it in. But if the government's crashed, there's no water company. If our government is actually working for the Antichrist, then there's definitely no water, unless you take the mark of the beast. So you need to get to where you have water. You need to get to a place where you can have shelter, where you can arrange and get food. I say arrange because you can grow food, raise cattle and other things so that you can eat. But you need to make plans on what you're going to do and start preparing for it. The first thing you do, like I said, you look at where you are. Okay, I live in El Paso, Texas right now. El Paso, Texas is not designed for me to survive the end of times or any major disaster. It's in part of the desert. There is no fresh water, not worth speaking of. There's a lot of water down deep, but it's salt water. In a spur-of-the-moment time frame, if I had to run out and survive right now, I have no water supply. So I know I need to travel. Now, where I live, there's several places within about 3 hours that I could possibly go to and survive easier because there is water. One of those is a national park. One of them is a national forest. There's a trend rolling there. As you're looking for where to go, you need to see where the nearest forests are, where the nearest source of water. After water, food. Once you have water and food, somewhere in between there you need shelter. In a forest, you can always build shelter. This is what it comes down to being ready. It means sitting down, figuring out what you're going to do, and start making the plans on how to do it. Now, on my website, I will be going through different survival plans, different types of tents, evaluating them, evaluating the different types of axes, knives, blankets, sleeping bags, everything that you basically will need to survive in the wilderness. Sources of power, what to take with you, all of these things. You need to sit down and decide, A, where are you going to go? B, How are you going to get there? C, who's going to go with you? Now, it's C I want to discuss right now with you, and that's who's going to go with you. Being ready means you've talked with others, you've made your plans, and hopefully you're not going to just bug out and blow everybody off. You have friends, you have family, you have hopefully members in the church that you go with. Look at your church, look at your friends, those that agree with you and have decided to be prepared also. Make plans together. You could divide the load up a little bit that way. But remember that although you can divide some things, you have to increase other things. Being ready is about talking and about planning. You can't do a lot of planning if it happens tomorrow. But if it happens, say, 3 years from now, you can get a lot of planning in. If it happens in 7 years, you could even be even further along in your planning. As you're making your plans and you're talking with your friends and your family, you divide your plans up in the immediate, intermediate, and long term. Immediate is basically pack your bag, like Christ said, don't even bother going home to get a coat. Just go. Intermediate. All right, you've got a few years. This means that you'll have time to start putting away equipment and gear, maybe trading in that old car of yours for something that can actually get up into the mountains or out into the wilderness. You've bought the different equipment that would make your life easier. Nothing is going to make your life easy, but it can make it easier and make the difference between surviving and thriving. Planning makes it all. Now, again, I'm not telling you go run and hide in the mountains right now. If you didn't hear me say that a single time during this episode. Why? Because it's not time to run. Now is the time to plan. In the Old Testament, the Bible tells us there is a time for everything, and to everything there is a time. This is the time of planning. This is the time of becoming ready, so that when Christ does return, we're ready. Remember, don't hesitate to look at go back over the first section, look at the website, learn how to increase the fire in your personal life, as well as being ready for what the prophecies say we may be facing. And one last thing, if you enjoyed this show at all, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends. If you want to donate, go to the website. It'll show you several ways to donate to the cause. If you need to get a hold of me, go to the website. It gives you our email address. And shortly, hopefully, we'll have our own actual web page where we have our own domain. But we're starting slow. As I said in the first episode, this is a brand new ministry, so it's a brand new way of thinking. I'm learning things every day, and I hope that as I progress, these shows become more interesting and more relevant to each and every one of you. So, on that note, this is A.T. Martinez, closing out the first episode on prophecy and what you're being ready for. Hope you enjoyed the show, and again, once more, please subscribe, tell your friends about us, get them to subscribe. Have a wonderful, God-filled night and day.